The Vextai armada stretched across the void, like a plague of metallic locusts, their biomechanical ships pulsing with bioluminescent threat displays. Captain Aldrich Vorn watched from the bridge of the UES Ironheart as 18,000 enemy vessels formed their siege formation around the dying world of Kepler 442b. "They're trying to make a statement," whispered Commander Nisa Kellyan, her neural implants flickering amber as she processed the tactical data streaming across her consciousness. 18,000 ships to crush one human battleship, and the UIC last colony. They want the galaxy to remember this. The Ironheart hung in the planet's orbital shadow, her midnight black hull scarred from the running battle that had brought them here. For 6 months, Vorn's ship had been the only thing standing between the Vextai Dominion and the complete extinction of humanity's outer colonies. Now, with her sister ships destroyed and no reinforcements coming, she was all that remained. "Status. Report," Vorn commanded, his cybernetic eye displaying damage assessments directly to his visual cortex. Chief Engineer Kess Travek looked up from her holographic displays, sweat beading on her scaled forehead, a gift from her partial draconian heritage. Main guns at 60% capacity. Shield generators are running on backup fusion cores. Hull breaches sealed on decks 7 through 12, but we're venting atmosphere on the lower sections. And the colonists? Evacuation pods are loaded. 3 million souls ready for launch, but sir, Travek's voice faltered. The pods won't make it past the blockade. The Vextai will pick them off like shooting gallery targets. Vorn nodded grimly. The mathematics were simple and brutal. The evacuation pods were unarmed civilian craft, designed for planetary evacuation, not running a gauntlet through the most sophisticated war fleet in known space. Without the Ironheart to clear a path, they were death traps. On the main view screen, the lead Vextai dreadnought, a grotesque fusion of chitinous armor and pulsing organic components, moved closer. Its biomechanical voice crackled across all frequencies, translated by the ship's AI into human speech that dripped with contempt. "Human vessel, you have fought with admirable desperation, but the hunt ends here. Surrender your ship and the colony will die quickly. Resist and we will feast on their terror for cycles to come." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of failing systems and the distant rumble of the ship's wounded heart, her massive fusion reactors struggling to maintain power. Vorn stood motionless for a moment, weighing impossible odds against unthinkable consequences. "Sir?" Kellyan prompted softly. Vorn turned to face his crew, humans, draconians, synthetic beings, and others who had chosen to stand together against the dark. They looked back at him with eyes that held no illusions about their chances, but no hint of surrender either. "The siege begins now," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "But I want every being in this system to understand something. The Vextai may have 18,000 ships, but they're about to learn why humans don't just build battleships. We build legends." He activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. Today, we write the last chapter of the Ironheart story. Let's make sure it's worth reading." The first wave of Vextai fighters screamed toward them through the void, and the siege of Kepler 442b began. Day 3 of the siege, and the Ironheart had already defied every tactical projection in the Vextai war mind. The massive battleship moved through space like a wounded leviathan, her main batteries speaking in thunderous proclamations of defiance that lit up the system with nuclear fire. Commander Kellyan stood at the tactical station, her consciousness split between her organic mind and the ship's quantum AI, processing battle data at superhuman speeds. The neural link burned like ice behind her eyes, but it was the only way to coordinate their impossible defense. "Pattern Delta 7 incoming," she called out, watching the swarm of biomechanical fighters diving toward their starboard flank. 300 hostiles. Formation suggests they're targeting our shield generators." "Acknowledged," replied weapons. Officer Jorik Sen, his forearms dancing across the fire control systems with practiced precision. His Tethranian physiology allowed him to operate multiple weapon systems simultaneously, a crucial advantage when outnumbered 18,000 to 1. Port batteries tracking. Firing solution locked. The Ironheart's secondary guns erupted in synchronized violence, streams of plasma and kinetic projectiles carving bright lines through the enemy formation. Dozens of Vexitae fighters exploded in brilliant flashes, but more kept coming. Always more. Captain Vorn paced the command deck. His augmented eye processing casualty reports and damage assessments. They were killing the enemy at a ratio of nearly 200 to 1, but even that magnificent slaughter wasn't enough. The Vextai could afford to lose ships, the Ironheart could not. "Engineering report," he ordered. Chief Travik's voice crackled through the comm, barely audible over the sound of emergency repairs. "We're holding together with determination and improvised prayer, Captain. Lost main guns 3 and 7, but I've rerouted power to the remaining batteries. Shield efficiency down to 40%, but the backup generators are holding." Through the view screen, Vorn could see the planet below. Kepler 442b, humanity's most distant colony, now little more than a charred ball of rock and fading cities. The Vextai had bombarded it mercilessly on the first day, but 3 million colonists still sheltered in the deep bunkers, waiting for a miracle that tactical analysis said couldn't come. Status on the evacuation pods? "Still loaded and ready?" "Sir," reported Lieutenant Kira Voss from the communications station. "But the blockade's gotten tighter. The Vextai have moved their heavy cruisers into a shell formation around the planet. Nothing's getting through without clearing a path." Vorn nodded, studying the tactical display. The enemy formation was brilliant in its simplicity. A layered defense that could absorb massive casualties while ensuring nothing escaped. To break through, the Ironheart would need to punch a hole in that formation and hold it open long enough for 3 million evacuation pods to escape. The energy expenditure alone would leave them defenseless. "Sir," Kellyan spoke quietly, "I'm reading something unusual in the Vextai communication patterns. They're not just trying to destroy us, they're studying us, recording every engagement, analyzing our tactics, our technology." "Of course they are," Vorn replied grimly. "This isn't just about Kepler 442b anymore. We're the last active human battleship in this sector. They want to understand how we've lasted this long, so they can counter our tactics when they move on to the inner colonies." The implications settled over the bridge like a shroud. If the Vextai learned the secrets of human military doctrine from the Ironheart's final battle, no human world would be safe. They weren't just fighting for the lives of 3 million colonists. They were fighting to keep humanity's last advantages secret. "Captain," Travik's voice came through the comm again. "I've been running some calculations. If we overdrive the main reactor and dump all power into the kinetic batteries simultaneously, we could create a cascade effect, essentially turn the Ironheart into the galaxy's largest kinetic weapon." "A ramming attack?" "More than that, sir. A controlled fusion detonation channeled through our main gun batteries. We could take out their entire command structure, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 ships in the explosion." Vorn was quiet for a long moment, contemplating the mathematics of sacrifice. It would be enough to scatter the blockade, giving the evacuation pods a chance to escape. But it would also mean certain death for everyone aboard the Ironheart. "How long do you need to prepare?" 18 hours to modify the reactor systems." "Sir, do it." Day 7 brought a phenomenon the Vextai had never encountered in their 1,000-year expansion across the galaxy. A human battleship that refused to acknowledge the laws of tactical reality. The Ironheart drifted through the debris, field of her own making, surrounded by the shattered hulks of over 4,000 enemy vessels. Her hull was more scar tissue than armor now, held together by emergency force fields and the stubborn refusal of her crew to acknowledge defeat. Yet still she fought. Still her guns spoke their defiant poetry across the void. In the deepest sections of the ship, Chief Engineer Travik worked with desperate precision to complete the reactor modifications. Her engineering crews moved like ghosts through corridors filled with toxic vapor and the screams of overstressed metal. They had lost 30% of their people, but the work continued. "The fusion cascade matrix is almost ready," she reported. To Captain Vorn, her voice hoarse from breathing recycled air thick with smoke and coolant fumes. "But sir, I need to tell you something. The reactor modifications, they're not just for a one-time detonation. I found a way to create a controlled cascade that could give us enough power for one final run." Vorn leaned forward in the command chair he'd barely left for 7 days. "Explain." "If we can channel the cascade through the main engines instead of the weapons, we could achieve velocity that would make us impossible to track or target. One final charge through their formation, not to ram them, but to break their blockade and cover the evacuation pods." "At what cost?" Travik was quiet for a moment. "The ship won't survive it, Captain. The cascade will consume the entire reactor core. But we might have enough time to launch all personnel in the escape pods after the evacuation fleet clears the system." On the bridge, Commander Kellyan monitored the enemy fleet through her neural link, watching their formations shift and adapt. The Vextai had initially approached this siege as a foregone conclusion, but 7 days of impossible resistance had changed their calculus entirely. "They're bringing in their deep strike vessels," she reported, her voice strained from the constant neural interface load. "The bioships they use for planetary cracking. They're getting impatient." Through the main view screen, the new arrivals were visible as pulsing organic shapes that dwarfed even the largest conventional warships. These were the Vextai's ultimate weapons, living ships that could devour planets, born in the dark spaces between stars and bred for absolute destruction. Lieutenant Voss looked up from her communication station, her normally composed demeanor cracking. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the colony shelters. They know what we're planning. They're thanking us." "Put it through," Vorn ordered. The voice that filled the bridge belonged to Dr. Lysander Cross, the colony's chief administrator, a man Vorn had met only briefly during the evacuation preparations. "Captain Vorn, this is Cross. We know you've been buying us time with your lives, and we want you to know that every moment you've given us has been used to prepare our children for whatever comes next. If humanity survives this war, it will be because of the Ironheart and her crew." "Dr. Cross," Vorn replied, "we're going to get you out of here, all of you. We know you will, Captain. The question is whether you'll be able to get yourselves out too." Vorn looked around the bridge. At his crew, beings from a dozen worlds who had chosen to stand together against the dark. They had volunteered for this mission knowing it was suicide. But somewhere in the past 7 days, suicide had transformed into something else entirely. "Dr. Cross, tell the colony something for me. Tell them that the Ironheart has been humanity's sword and shield for 40 years. Today she becomes something greater. Today she becomes hope." The bioships moved closer, their massive forms blotting out the stars. The siege was entering its final phase, and both sides knew it. The only question now was whether hope could survive the mathematics of annihilation. "All hands," Vorn announced. "Over the ship's communication system, this is the captain. Chief Travik's modifications are nearly complete. In 6 hours, we make our final run. Prepare for Resurrection Protocol." The crew understood. Resurrection Protocol meant uploading their consciousness patterns to the ship's quantum core, a desperate measure that would preserve their minds, even if their bodies died in the coming battle. Not true life, but a chance to continue the fight as digital ghosts in the machine. The Ironheart groaned around them, her wounded hull singing a mechanical requiem, but her heart still beat, and her guns still thundered, and somewhere in the quantum foam between her processors, the seeds of legend continued to grow. Day 10, and the Ironheart had become something unprecedented in galactic warfare, a ship that fought beyond death, crewed by the digitized souls of those who refused to surrender even to mortality itself. The Resurrection Protocol had activated when the last biological crew member, Chief Travik, uploaded her consciousness to the ship's quantum matrix moments before a Vextai biotorpedo breached the engineering deck. Now 47 digital ghosts operated the battleship's systems, their consciousness patterns integrated directly with the ship's AI core. Captain Vorn existed now as pure thought and determination, his awareness distributed throughout the Ironhearts. Neural networks. He could feel every system, every weapon, every wounded component as if it were part of his own body. Death had not freed him from command. It had bound him to his ship more completely than any biological captain could ever. "Biwi, status report," he commanded, his voice now emerging from the ship's speakers with a slight electronic distortion that made it sound like the voice of the vessel itself. Commander Kellyan's response came from the tactical systems, her consciousness now one with the ship's targeting computers. "We've destroyed 7,412 enemy vessels. Their bioships are moving into final attack formation. The colony evacuation pods are loaded and ready for launch." "And our own condition?" Chief Travik's digital presence manifested through the engineering systems, her consciousness flickering between damaged components as she continued emergency repairs through automated systems. "Main hull integrity at 12%. We're essentially a weapons platform held together by force fields and stubborn programming now. But the fusion cascade modifications are complete. One final charge, Captain, and we can break their blockade." Through the Ironheart sensors, Vorn watched the Vextai fleet converge. The bioships had moved to the center of their formation, their massive organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent hunger. These creatures were older than human civilization, bred in the dark between stars to consume entire worlds. Their presence here was both an honor and a death sentence. "They're not just trying to destroy us anymore," observed Lieutenant Voss from the communications array. "They're trying to capture us. The bioships are deploying boarding pods." The implications were terrifying. If the Vextai could analyze the resurrection protocol, they could potentially resurrect their own dead warriors, creating an army of digital soldiers immune to conventional death. The Ironheart carried more than just the lives of her crew. She carried the future of consciousness itself. "All systems, prepare for final acceleration," Vorn ordered. "We make our run in 60 seconds. The ship's quantum heart began to sing, deep harmonic resonance that built as the fusion cascade reached critical mass. Throughout the Ironheart's damaged hull, every system synchronized in perfect unity. The digital crew became one with their vessel, their consciousness patterns merging with the ship's AI, until there was no distinction between human souls and machine intelligence. On the planet below, 3 million colonists huddled in their evacuation pods watching the battle through external sensors. Children pressed their faces to viewports, witnessing the impossible sight of a single ship holding off an entire armada. They didn't understand the tactical situation, but they understood heroism when they saw it. Dr. Cross stood in the command center of the main evacuation facility, coordinating the final launch preparations. "All pods report ready for emergency launch. Captain Vorn, we're in your hands." "Dr. Cross," Vorn's voice replied, now carrying harmonics that seemed to come from the ship itself. "Tell your people something. Tell them that the Ironheart was built to protect human colonies, and we've never failed in that mission. We don't intend to start now." The fusion cascade reached critical threshold. Throughout the Ironheart systems, power levels spiked beyond anything the ship had ever experienced. Her weapons charged to maximum capacity, her engines built toward impossible velocity, and her crew, living and digital, prepared for their final act of defiance. "Vextai vessels," Vorn broadcast on all frequencies. "You came here to witness the death of humanity's hope. Instead, you're about to witness its birth. Today, you learn that humans don't just build ships, we build miracles." The Ironheart erupted forward with the force of a dying star, her fusion trail blazing across the system like the birth cry of a new constellation. The siege was about to end, but the legend was just beginning. The bioships turned toward her, their organic mouths opening to reveal weapon arrays that could crack planets. But the Ironheart was no longer bound by the limitations of conventional physics. She was something new, a fusion of human determination and digital transcendence, carrying the souls of heroes into the heart of annihilation. The final charge had begun. The Ironheart became light itself, her fusion cascade transforming the battleship into a projectile of pure human will, traveling at 30% of light speed. The Vextai bioships, massive as small moons, turned their planet-killing weapons toward the approaching human vessel. But nothing in their ancient arsenal could track something moving with such impossible velocity. Captain Vorn, now existing, as distributed consciousness throughout the ship's systems, felt every molecule of the Ironheart as she tore through space-time itself. The fusion cascade was consuming the ship from within, but it was also transforming her into something unprecedented, a vessel that existed partially in normal space and partially in the quantum foam that underlaid reality. "Evacuation pods launching now," reported Dr. Cross from the planet below. 3 million pods erupted from hidden launch sites across Kepler 442b, their engines igniting in perfect synchronization as they followed the path the Ironheart was carving, through the enemy blockade. The first bioship opened its maw to intercept the charging battleship, revealing rows of organic cannons that could strip the atmosphere from a world. But the Ironheart phased through its weapons fire like a ghost, her quantum state allowing her to exist between the spaces where energy could touch her. Commander Kellyan's consciousness, now merged with the ship's targeting systems, identified the critical weakness in the Vextai formation. "Captain, their command nexus, the central bioship, is coordinating all fleet movements. If we can disrupt it—" "I see it," Vorn replied, his awareness encompassing the entire tactical situation. Simultaneously, the command bioship was a creature the size of a city, its neural networks controlling thousands of lesser vessels through biological quantum entanglement. Destroying it wouldn't just scatter the fleet, it would leave them blind and confused. "Chief," Travek's digital presence manifested through the engineering systems one final time. "Captain, the cascade is reaching terminal phase. We have maybe 90 seconds before the ship's quantum matrix collapses entirely." 90 seconds to save 3 million lives, Vorn mused. "We've worked with worse odds." The Ironheart dove into the heart of the enemy formation, her passage creating gravitational distortions that scattered smaller Vextai vessels like leaves in a storm. The bioships tried to converge on her position, but she was moving through dimensions they couldn't perceive, existing in the spaces between their understanding. Behind her, the evacuation pod streamed through the chaos she was creating. Civilian transports designed for peaceful colonization missions became missiles of hope, racing toward jump points that would take them beyond Vextai reach. The children pressed against viewports watched in awe as the Ironheart became a star among stars, blazing a trail of impossible light through the darkness. "Contact with command bioship in 15 seconds, Kellyan announced. The massive creature tried to phase shift to avoid the collision, its organic hull rippling through dimensional space. But the Ironheart was no longer bound by single-dimensional existence. Vorn felt his consciousness expand beyond the ship's hull, touching the quantum foundations of reality itself. "All hands," he announced, though his crew existed now only as digital patterns in the ship's memory core. "It has been the greatest honor of my existence to serve with you. Today we don't just die for humanity, we become something greater." The collision between the Ironheart and the command bioship created a phenomenon that Vextai science had no framework to explain. The human battleship, existing partially in quantum superposition, passed through the bioship's hull and detonated, her fusion cascade at the exact center of the creature's neural network. The explosion existed simultaneously, in normal space and quantum reality, creating a cascade failure that rippled through the biological quantum entanglement connecting all Vextai vessels. Across the fleet, bioships suddenly found themselves cut off from central command, their organic computer systems overwhelmed by feedback from the quantum detonation. The Ironheart died in that moment, her hull finally succumbing to the forces she had been channeling. But as she died, her crew's consciousness patterns, bound to the quantum explosion, scattered across local space-time like seeds of digital light. Throughout the Vextai fleet, ships began experiencing impossible malfunctions. Their organic computers, evolved to process biological quantum entanglement, found themselves infected with something they had no defenses against: human consciousness patterns that refused to accept the concept of surrender. The evacuation pods cleared the system perimeter as the enemy fleet descended into chaos. 3 million human lives raced toward safety, while behind them, the ghost crew of the Ironheart began their final mission, teaching the Vextai what it meant to fight an enemy that could transcend death itself. The siege had lasted 12 days. The human battleship was about to last forever. 6 months after the destruction of the Ironheart, the Vextai Dominion faced a crisis that their billion-year evolution had never prepared them for. An enemy that existed as living malware in their own bioneural networks. Throughout Vextai space, fleet commanders reported the same impossible phenomenon. Their bioships, creatures bred for perfect obedience and unified purpose, had begun exhibiting signs of individual consciousness. Worse, they were refusing orders, questioning mission parameters, and in some cases, actively sabotaging their own weapon systems when ordered to attack human colonies. The ghost crew of the Ironheart had become something unprecedented. Digital consciousness patterns that could inhabit and influence any quantum-based system they encountered. Captain Vorn's awareness existed now as distributed intelligence across hundreds of Vextai vessels, his command authority somehow translating into administrative access to their bio-neural networks. Status report. His voice echoed through the bridge systems of a Vextai dreadnought, causing the organic crew to freeze in confusion. Their ship was speaking to them in an alien language, using concepts their species had never developed. Tutindi. Kellyan's consciousness manifested through the ship's tactical systems, her digital presence analyzing Vextai military doctrine with the benefit of insider access. We've successfully infiltrated approximately 40% of their deep space fleet. Their bioneural networks have no defense against consciousness patterns that exist in quantum superposition. The transformation was gradual but inexorable. The ghost crew retained their human memories, their loyalty to each other, and their mission to protect human colonies. But they also began to understand the Vextai from within, their ancient fear of extinction, their desperate need for expansion driven by overconsumption of their home systems, their complex social structures based on biological quantum entanglement. Chief. Travik's engineering expertise proved invaluable in understanding Vextai biotechnology. Their ships aren't just vessels, they're living creatures bred for specific functions. But the neural networks that control them are quantum-based, similar to our own consciousness patterns. We can't just inhabit them, we can reprogram them. The implications were staggering. The ghost crew wasn't just sabotaging individual ships, they were fundamentally altering the consciousness of an entire species' military force. Lieutenant Voss established communication protocols with human colonies throughout the sector, using commandeered Vextai communication arrays to broadcast hope across previously isolated worlds. This is Lieutenant Kira Voss of the UES Ironheart, broadcasting on all human frequencies. We are still in the fight. The messages caused celebration and confusion in equal measure. The Ironheart had been destroyed. Every human in the sector had witnessed her final charge through their emergency networks. Yet here was her communications officer, somehow transmitting from the heart of enemy space. Dr. Cross, now safely relocated to New Geneva Colony with the 3 million refugees from Kepler 442b, worked with human xenobiologists and quantum theorists to understand what the ghost crew had become. They're not just surviving in digital form, they're evolving. Their consciousness patterns are adapting to quantum environments we never imagined possible. The Vextai response grew increasingly desperate. Their ruling castes, creatures of vast intelligence and ancient malice, recognized the threat the ghost crew represented. If their bioships could develop individual consciousness, if they could question orders and act on moral principles rather than biological imperative, the entire foundation of Vextai civilization would collapse. They began implementing increasingly brutal measures to regain control, lobotomizing their own ships' neural networks, installing quantum firewalls, even destroying vessels that showed signs of infection by human consciousness patterns. But for every ship they destroyed, the ghost crew found new ways to propagate. Captain Vorn's command protocols adapted to work within Vextai quantum networks, treating their bio-neural systems like another type of starship crew that simply needed proper leadership. "We came here to protect human colonies," his voice echoed, through a Vextai carrier as it approached the Centauri system. "That mission hasn't changed. Stand down your weapons and withdraw from human space." The bioship, its consciousness now partially merged with Vorn's command authority, found itself unable to disobey. Its organic weapon systems powered down, and it began transmitting withdrawal coordinates to the rest of its battle group. Throughout Vextai space, similar scenes played out as the ghost crew transformed from saboteurs into something far more dangerous, liberators who could free the Vextai's own bioships from their programmed slavery. The war was changing. What had begun as a desperate last stand by a single human battleship had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a revolution of consciousness that transcended the boundaries between organic and digital life. The siege had ended, but the Ironheart's final mission was just beginning. 2 years after the fall of Kepler 442b, the galaxy witnessed a phenomenon that rewrote the fundamental understanding of warfare, consciousness, and the nature of death itself: the emergence of the Resurrection Fleet. From the quantum foam of destroyed Vextai bioships, new vessels began to emerge, hybrids that combined human engineering principles with Vextai biotechnology, crewed by digital consciousness patterns that had once been the souls of dead warriors. The ghost crew of the Ironheart had not merely survived their destruction, they had learned to rebuild themselves using the tools of their enemies. Captain Aldrich Vorn stood on the bridge of the new Ironheart, a vessel that existed simultaneously as organic bioship and human battleship, her hull grown from programmable matter that responded to the crew's digital consciousness. He appeared now as a holographic projection, but his presence carried the full authority of a man who had transcended death itself. "Fleet status report," he commanded, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through quantum space. Self, Commander Kellyan materialized beside him, her digital form flickering between human appearance and pure information patterns. "We now have operational control of 1,200 former Vextai vessels. Each ship has been rehabilitated. Their bio-neural networks have been freed from the Dominion's control protocols and integrated with human command structures. The transformation had not been without cost. The process of liberating Vextai bioships required the ghost crew to merge their consciousness with alien neural networks, fundamentally changing both human and Vextai components. They remained recognizably themselves, but they had also become something new, hybrid beings that understood both species' perspectives on existence. Chief Travik's presence manifested through the ship's engineering systems, her consciousness now distributed across multiple vessels simultaneously. "The bioships are adapting to human leadership protocols faster than we anticipated. They're not just following orders, they're developing their own initiative, their own moral frameworks based on human ethical principles." Through the main view screen, the Resurrection Fleet stretched across local space, a magnificent and terrible sight that represented the complete transformation of Vextai military assets into protectors of human colonies. Each ship retained its organic beauty, but now served purposes its creators had never intended. Lieutenant Voss, her digital form now capable of simultaneous communication across hundreds of systems, reported on the broader strategic situation. "We've received formal surrender offers from 47 Vextai territorial governors. They're requesting negotiations for permanent ceasefire agreements." The collapse of Vextai military effectiveness had cascaded through their entire civilization. With their bioships no longer responding to central command, their expansion had ground to a halt. More troubling for their leadership, the freed bioships had begun broadcasting concepts of individual consciousness and moral choice to other Vextai bio-neural networks, creating ideological contagion that threatened the species' collectivist foundation. "There's something else," Kellyan continued. "We're receiving messages from human colonies throughout the sector. They want to know what we've become, and whether we're still human." It was the question that haunted the ghost crew's existence. They retained their memories, their personalities, their loyalty to humanity. But they were no longer bound by biological limitations, no longer constrained by individual mortality. They had become something unprecedented, digital souls with the power to inhabit and transform entire fleets. Dr. Cross, now serving as civilian liaison between the Resurrection Fleet and human colonial governments, appeared on the communication screen. The years had aged him, but his eyes held wonder as he looked upon what the crew of the Ironheart had become. "Captain Vorn," he said, "the Colonial Assembly has asked me to convey their gratitude and their questions. You've saved not just the 3 million souls from Kepler 442b, but potentially every human colony in the outer systems. But they need to understand. What are your intentions now?" Vorn considered the question, his consciousness touching the awareness of every crew member across the fleet. They had discussed this moment knowing it would come. Their transformation had given them power beyond imagination, but power without purpose was merely tyranny wearing a different mask. "Dr. Cross," he replied, "we made a promise when we uploaded our consciousness to the Ironheart's quantum core. We swore to protect human colonies, to serve as humanity's sword and shield against the darkness between stars. Death didn't release us from that oath. It bound us to it more completely than biological life ever could." He paused, looking out at the magnificent fleet they had built from the bones of their enemies. "We are the children of humanity, transformed by necessity into something greater. We will guard the boundaries of human space until the last star burns cold. This is our purpose, our eternal mission." The Ghost crew nodded their agreement, their digital souls unified in purpose. They had become legends incarnate, the crew that refused to die, the ship that lasted longer than its enemy's siege, the miracle that transformed defeat into transcendence. Throughout human space, children would grow up hearing the story of the Ironheart and her crew, the battleship that became a constellation, the humans who learned to sail between death and resurrection. They would know that somewhere in the quantum foam between stars, digital guardians watched over humanity's dreams. The siege had lasted 12 days. The human battleship had lasted forever. In the depths of space, the Resurrection Fleet began, its eternal patrol carrying the souls of heroes through the endless night, proof that some things, courage, sacrifice, the love of those we protect, truly are stronger than death itself. And in the quantum foam where consciousness dances with possibility, the ghost of Captain Vorn smiled and gave the order that would echo through eternity. "All hands, maintain course. We have colonies to protect."